further their education through trade schools, community colleges, or four-year colleges. But to do that, to continue that education, it all takes support and money and effort. At the Estero High School award ceremony on May 2nd, which was introduced by Principal Mike Amabel, Mike pointed out that this senior class received nearly $3 million in scholarships. That's a lot of money in scholarships. And of that $3 million, $350,000 came from local organizations. That's a considerable amount of money, $350,000 in local scholarships. For example, the ECCL, Estero Historical Society, the Estero Chamber of Commerce, they each donated $1,000 in scholarship money based on an essay contest that was put together by the three organizations that we ran. And the students were encouraged to write essays about the village history or about village governance or about the business communities and the history of business in the Estero area. And I was very fortunate to be one of the 15 judges that got to look at these essays. Now, they were presented blindly to us. We didn't know who the students were by name. We just got a copy of that essay. And I was really fortunate to be able to be one of those judges because they were really impressive. Before I retired in my previous life, I was a magazine publisher and worked with a lot of editors and saw a lot of writing and saw a lot of stories. But I was very impressed by what the seniors produced in terms of writing histories about the various aspects of Estero. And we did make awards of those three $1,000 scholarships to each of the students. Now, if you think about $350,000, and there was 300 students, that's roughly about $1,000 average per student. But of course, it don't go all to one, we don't spread it out. That's an average. There's little money goes to a lot of different people, but that was only an average. But still, I think that's a considerable amount of local commitment. But it could be more. Another example of some local scholarships that I want to mention was the FGCU Foundation. They gave a $10,000 annual scholarship as an award to an Estero High senior. Now that's for 4 years. That's $10,000 for 4 years, so that was $40,000 that FGCU contributed to one student over a 4-year period that was an Estero High School graduate. So there's a lot of people in the community. In fact, in the brochure for that night, the award ceremony, there were almost 20 organizations that committed to making contributions to our community education. But it's not only money that we need, we also need support and individuals and volunteers and continued activity there. Now I can give you some examples, the activity of things that need to go on out there. You may remember that pre-COVID, we had a junior achievement program sponsored by the ECCL. It was called 258 Graduate. And it was a very successful program thanks to the efforts of leadership of Jim Shields. And we had over 135 volunteers that did that program. That was pre-pandemic. And the co-chairman that works with me on that program, Amy, is with us today. And Amy was a strong voice in making that happen. It takes a lot of people like that to make those things happen. And we were able to do a little of that program through the pandemic, but not much. In fact, it wasn't until November and December of last year where we tried to get back into schools with an 8th grade program through one teacher who worked with us. And we did, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 117 students and 6 volunteers were involved in that program. But the pandemic caused us to slow down. And in December, after that was over, we said, let's talk to the teachers and find out when we can go back into the schools. And we tried to get back into those schools with a program beginning in January of this year. And all the principals and the teachers were happy to have us back, but of course, you know what happened. Omicron came about, a variant came about, and we had to shut that program down. So we were not able to get it started back up. However, at the end of this year in April and May, we did have a small program at 2 schools. At the high school, we had 2 teachers that worked with us, and at the high school, we did a program that allowed us to work with 63 students. They were seniors, and we did personal financial management using 3 volunteers, a very limited kind of program. There were 18 sessions at the 8th grade school where we did economics for success by 4 volunteers and affected 55 students. So in April, May of this year, we continued that program, and they were small programs for a couple of reasons. A lot of the volunteers had gone north, and we wanted to be really cautious about safety in the COVID situation. But they were very successful. The teachers all wanted us to come back, and we're hoping to be able to get back into schools with a program in the upcoming September, October, fall of the year. So we're working to try to do that, but that takes a lot of people, takes a lot of volunteers. And we know from talking to the schools, we don't only have JA as a possibility in the schools, we also want to do things in the schools that will just help improve the education. And we've had a couple little programs and a couple little things that we've talked to different principals about. And I put together a little program called, I kind of stole the name from the junior achievement, called Education Ambassadors, Estero Education Ambassadors, where junior achievement can be a large commitment, but there could be a smaller commitment, a smaller time. And fortunately, this community, the greater Estero area, we have a lot of willing, knowledgeable people who can really help out with various things that need to be done in our education system. Let me give you a sample of that. We know, for example, we've all heard about the Estero High School soccer team, the girls' soccer team, and they've been very successful over the years. And there's some volunteers that are members of the ECCL that have worked with the soccer team to help them through. They do certain things on an as-needed basis. And we're working to try to get more volunteers to recognize their skills and their interest and how they can be matched up with the needs of the school. Slides. So we are going to encourage you as we move into the next season, September, October, November. Amy and I would like you to contact us if you've got some interest and if you're willing to go into the schools and work with us on a lot of different programs. It could be sporting events, it could be helping students. We're doing a little mentoring with students. There's a number of different opportunities. What we're really trying to do with this program is we're trying to match up the special needs that our schools have with willing ambassadors, volunteers, that want to come in and help our schools improve the education of our youth. And by improving the education of our youth, we're improving the community, because youth is really the future of our community. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any questions. Yes?
I have a question. I used to volunteer for the Abbott program, and I guess that's gone now, huh?
No, Abbott is not gone.
Isn't it?
No.
Oh, okay, I haven't heard anything, so I just...
No, they have Abbott in the middle school,
That's where I was.
okay, and also in the high school.
I haven't heard anything about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe they just don't, I don't
And do you
know.
have a phone number if we want to do something?
440-567-3448. One of the programs that Mike is really focused on, and the principals, especially at the elementary schools and the middle school, you know, there's all different demographics in these schools, and some kids go home and don't get a lot of parental attention. And Mike doesn't like to call it this, but they need a grandma and I wanna call it the grandma and grandpa program. But it's to go in and just talk to these kids that don't get any, you know, read a book, what's on your mind, what's bothering you today? And with all this educational stuff we're doing, I mean, I got a hug from an 8th grader a couple weeks ago. I didn't even like my own kids when they were that age. I love these kids, you know? But we don't expect a lot of time. I mean, to teach a session of junior achievement is 6 times 1 hour apiece. Same for the high school. It's not a huge commitment. Same with Grandma and Grandpa program.
We just did a little test at Pine Woods Elementary with a couple of volunteers, myself and another gentleman, and we had a couple young men that we spent, 3 sessions with, about an hour long each, varied a little bit because of school arrangements. But the young man I was working with was interesting. I think he wasn't connecting to the students, and it came out to me that it was a merged family situation, and his grandfather, who is very Italian, had passed away. And he kept relating back to how important that grandfather was in his life. He was suffering a loss of that grandfather. I'm sure his parents knew about that too. But the kids didn't want to hear about that. But as an adult, I understood that, and I became a good listener. And I got 7 grandkids myself. And Amy, you're absolutely right. I don't like calling it the grandpa grandma thing, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
Being a good listener sometimes can just help people get through their emotional grief.
And they're not dumping on their family.
And the schools went through a lot of issues with the pandemic. We all have issues with the pandemic. We all got tired of being held up in our little cocoons. And teachers and